Good evening, everyone. We're going to call this May 20th, 2019 Ridgefield HRA meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the special concurrent City Council and HRA Authority meeting of April 15th, 2019, the regular HRA meeting of April 15th, 2019, the special concurrent City Council, HRA, and Planning Commission work session of May 7th, 2019. Is there it's been moved and seconded. Are there any corrections or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the minutes. Next would be approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Are there any additions? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, we've approved the agenda. Next, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Executive Director Stark.
Thank you, Chair Supple and Commissioners. Tonight's consent calendar contains 4 separate items which are acted upon by the HRA in one motion. Once a consent calendar has been approved, all the individual items and recommended actions have also been approved, unless somebody on the HRA requests that an item be pulled, and that would be the time to do so. So tonight's consent calendar, item A, considering adoption of a resolution authorizing the Housing and Redevelopment Authority to affirm the monetary limits on statutory municipality tort liability. Item B, consider adoption of a resolution authorizing execution of a development agreement with the West Hennepin Affordable Land Housing Trust, doing business as Homes Within Reach, for the acquisition, rehabilitation, and sale of houses under the New Home Program, utilizing federal fiscal year 2018 Community Development Block Grant funds. Item C, consider adoption of a resolution approving an assumption agreement between NHH Companies, LLC, Cedar Point Investments, LLC, and the Housing and Redevelopment Authority. And item D, consider adoption of a resolution adopting a modification to the tax increment financing plan for the Lindale Gardens Tax Increment Financing District. And that concludes tonight's consent calendar. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Executive Director Stark?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. It seemed that there were no comments or questions, so all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the consent calendar. All right, item 4 is continuation of a public hearing from April 15th, 2019, and consideration of adoption of a resolution authorizing the sale of 6310 Irving Avenue South to Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, and approval of a contract for private development for the construction of a single-family home. So could we have the staff report first? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Supple. Housing Specialist Kate Aitchison is going to be providing the staff report.
Thank you, Chair and HRA. Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity is proposing to purchase 6310 Irving Avenue South from the HRA for the development of a single-family home that will be sold to an income-qualified buyer. So this falls under our new home program. The single-story home will offer approximately 1,300 square feet of finished living space and include 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and 2-car detached garage, with an estimated end value of $275,000. The full basement will include some unfinished space to allow for equity building in the future, and the main level will also include some accessibility features that we've asked for from Habitat. The proposed home has a traditional design and height, and again, it's a single-story home, and it will complement the existing homes in the area. This is a narrow lot. It's only 40 feet wide, so that was something we wanted to take into consideration. The home will be sold through Habitat's Land Trust, where they'll sell the structure but then retain the land ownership rights and provide a 100-year ground lease. The existing unpaved alley does not currently meet city construction standards, In order to provide access to the lot, Habitat will construct a new public alley. This alley will meet current city standards and will also serve 2 adjacent homes. The city and Habitat explored constructing a front-loading driveway on the property as an alternative to improving the alley. But the narrow width of the lot and the existing homes that are already there using it as well made it a challenge to really figure out how that was going to work. We're using federal CDBG dollars for originally to purchase the property, and that requires that it's developed as an affordable house for a household that earns no more than 80%, but Habitat works with households that are at the 60% median area and income or under. We'll enter into a contract for private development with Habitat for this home, and the contract does provide for the sale of the property for $1 to account for the added costs of the alley, as well as the accessibility features. And we have a Richfield alum, Mari Ojeda here. She's our project manager, and she's currently working on 7300 Portland, which is another Habitat house under construction. She'll be overseeing the project on Irving and can answer questions, as I can as well.
So do we have any questions? Commissioner Sandal?
Thank you. It is. Yeah. I did not get a chance to go and look at the property on site.
Speak up, please.
I was not able to get over there to take a look at it. Would you describe for us a front-loading driveway or whatever, or
No,
alley?
so it's a 40-foot wide lot, pretty narrow for Richfield. There's an existing kind of half alley that originally served half the block. Right now, it only serves 3 homes on Irving Avenue, and it's just been unimproved. The city pulled it from its alley improvement plan about 5 years ago. And so it's dirt, it's gravel, it's unimproved. We explored trying to pull a driveway out to the front to Irving and spent a lot of time trying to figure out if that was gonna work. It really limited our design on a narrow lot. And then you still have 2 homes that use the alley. And we've looked into acquiring those, and they aren't substandard, so they don't qualify for our acquisition. So that's the kind of compromise we've reached, is to work with Habitat to pave the alley to public works standards and allow for access on those 3 homes.
Thank you.
So since this is a public hearing, we're going to open it up. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment? If so, please sign your name and address on the paper and write it on the sheet up there by the microphone. And you'll push the button to get a green light to operate that microphone, and you'll have 3 minutes. So is there anyone who wishes to speak? Sir, go for it. And then if you'll push the button on the front of the microphone, it'll turn green, and we'll be able to hear you. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, my name is Thomas Dahlman. I own the property at 6309 James Avenue South, which is just behind this existing 6310 property. And I know that you people have explored the idea of putting the driveway out the front. And it's kind of saddening that you just deemed it a lot too narrow, because for years we've been trying to close this alley. And I mean, we've had, besides having the problem of people driving up there and then turning around in my yard and putting ruts in the yard and backing up and then going out, and people walking through the alley to get other places, we really wanted to close this alley. And I think at the last meeting about a year ago, I think it was, that we were discussing this. And I didn't get the information on the April 15th meeting. But the house right next to it, the Anderson house, I don't know if anybody's here from, that house is Well, it's even smaller than my house. I live at 6309, like I said. And that house should be purchased and tore down. I mean, it is very small. The garage is falling over. And I realize that she's older and can't do a lot of maintenance. But I would really like to see that property purchased and either sell some of the 20 feet of it to the house on the corner and then have a 60-foot lot, because isn't it lot 40 feet? Just at 6310?
Yes, that lot is 40 feet.
Okay. So it'd be a little bit wider, and then you could have build a house and have a double-car garage attached and go out the front, but I would really like to see this alley closed, because as far as I'm concerned, it's more problem. When I used to have my boat and stuff, it was kind of nice. I could go back and there, then the people across, they were complaining because their garbage cans were right out next to I'd have to move them in, put my boat in, and then half the time I'd forget. Then they'd get mad at me, but they're really good people. But I would really like to have this thing closed. And I think the house in the corner on Irving, they only use about 20 feet of the alley. And so it would be the Anderson house so there's only 2 actual houses that would use it if you built a house and had the attached garage. I mean, the detached garage coming in the alley. And I don't know if just having that alley improved, that it would be paved. I know at one point they wanted to have concrete, and just my share alone would have been about $5,000 to have it done, and we turned that down, I don't know how many years ago, all of us that are on the alley. And so I don't know if it would be conducive to have it paved. I don't know if it'd be better. Maybe when I sell the house, maybe they would like to put a garage out there too and have another garage. I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, and I know the other neighbors would like to have it closed, so.
All right. Thank you for your time.
So, any questions you want to ask me about it? Probably not, because you know what my opinion is of. And I was going to ask you, how much are you selling this lot for?
Commissioner Elliott, I think, had a question.
No, not for the speaker, but correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we have this before us, I don't know, a couple years ago about assessing? We were trying to decide whether or not to close it out, and there was going to be an assessment among the homeowners, and they unanimously didn't want to do it. What's the impact on the homeowners now if we're going to do that? Are they going to be paying an assessment on that?
No,
Okay,
Habitat's
so-
going to assume the full cost of
Okay,
constructing
for the full,
it.
for the
Yep.
paving, the cleaning, and everything else, so nothing is going to fall on the adjacent homeowners?
Correct.
Okay. It's the best I can do for you, sir.
Also, you don't have any price of what it hasn't been assessed or anything else.
Well,
So,
we can ask that. Thank you. Is there anybody else that wanted to speak? So we give everybody a fair chance to speak. Is there anyone else that wanted to speak? All right. Looks like we have another person coming up, so please sign in.
Hello, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I didn't really plan on speaking to this, but I didn't know you would be talking about a Habitat for Humanity thing.
Can
I-
you state your name before you begin?
Oh, I thought I said that I'm Judy Moe. I'm sorry. And my tag-along Raven Moe here.
And for the record, could you just state your address?
Currently, we don't have a permanent address. We've lived in Richfield for 5.5 years until a couple months ago, but we plan to find a home here. Actually, we are very close to the final process of qualifying for Habitat for Humanity, and we're hoping to stay here in Richfield. And normally when I speak on something, I've already gone and looked at the property and all of those things. I have not done that. But I just wanted to say how important housing like this is. And if we have an opportunity to build another Habitat house and give a family a home who wouldn't otherwise have them, I just want you to consider that as part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak?
Are you going to say something?
Yes.
Okay, so please state your name and also sign in. Thank you, and your address.
As my mom kind of said, my name's Raven Moe, and I was basically tagging on what my mom said pretty much about us pretty much not having a place to live right now. We're pretty much living in a hotel, and a lot of our stuff right now is in our car. We do have a storage unit, but not with all of our stuff in it. Most of it's in our car right now.
Do you want to say something about Habitat for Humanity?
And honestly, for me, I feel like having a Habitat house would help a lot for us, because a lot of those houses, they say like, well, we have an accessible house, like we have this, we have that, and that's important to me, like physically. So
Is that all you have to say?
kind of. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak for the public hearing? Anyone else who wishes to speak? Then do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, then do we have any further questions? I know the gentleman asked about the value of the property, if we could address that.
Well, a few things. As stated earlier, there won't be any assessments with this, and that's part of the way we're justifying selling this property to Habitat for $1. They're going above and beyond their normal design by adding some accessibility features, and then they are going to undertake the expense of paving this alley, which will serve mostly 2 homes and then the third on the corner as well. You know, I agree with Mr. Dahlman, I believe it was. In an ideal world, maybe we could acquire this other house. We did have it inspected about 5 years ago, and it was not deemed substandard. So we did attempt to purchase both kind of at the same time to address the alley access issue. And it just wasn't in the cards, and our market is really high right now, and so values are high. And we don't have the resources really to go and build the neighbor a new garage or a new driveway. So we did really do our best to explore closing the alley.
Are there any other questions? All right, Commissioner Freeze Daniels?
How will garbage pickup work? Will that go down the alleyway? Will that go down the street? Where are they? You know, as I'm looking at the drawing of the picture, I'm just kind of wondering, like, is the garbage truck going to come up the alley back out since there's no place to turn around? How do we envision that working? Public Works and so forth.
I can't speak to garbage. I mean, I assume that's what they'll do. That's, you know, there are other like half alleys in the city. It'll have to meet our zoning guidelines in terms of garage placement so that there is enough room for snow removal and for the user to back out of the garage. But Public Works is on board with our plan, and they're willing to do maintenance, et cetera.
And I would just add that the fire department was able to review this and give comments to us, so they felt that it was adequate for emergency vehicles. So I'm assuming if a fire rig can navigate it, that the trash will be able to figure something out.
And you said there are other half alleyways throughout Richfield that kind of mimic this. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
All right, did someone want to move adoption?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we've had a motion and a second to consider adoption of a resolution authorizing the sale of 6310 Irving Avenue South to Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity and approval of a contract for private development for the construction of a single-family home. Is there any further discussion?
I would just say, you know, I don't love the half alley, but I do love the house that's being put on there and that it's Habitat House, and I think that's really important. And so I think the positives outweigh the negatives in this situation in my mind. So.
I would also say that I was pleased to see that it was going to have accessibility features. I think that's important because that has come up in numerous discussions that we need more accessible housing. All right, if there's no further discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, we've approved the resolution and the contract for private development. Our next item is a public hearing and consideration of adoption of a resolution approving a contract for private development with MWF Properties for redevelopment of the City Garage South site at 7700 Pillsbury Avenue South with 55 units of affordable workforce housing. And so the staff report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Supple. Housing Manager Julie Urban is going to be providing the staff report on this one.
Chair Supple, members of the HRA, as Chair Supple explained, MWF Properties is proposing to purchase the City Garage South site, which is located at 7700 Pillsbury Avenue South, from the HRA to build 55 units of affordable workforce housing, and it will include 4 to 6 units for people with disabilities, along with supportive services. The developer is applying for federal low-income housing tax credits to assist with financing the project. In addition, the developer is seeking city financial participation through a write-down in the cost of the land. The property appraised at $770,000. The developer is proposing to pay $70,000 for the land at closing and having the remainder of the price to be repaid through tax increment financing over time. The proposed contract for private development before you provides the following terms. The developer will construct minimum improvements that include those 55 units of housing, including the 4 to 6 units for people with disabilities. Rents for the project will be affordable to households earning between 30% and 70% of the area median income. The developer will pay the HRA $70,000 at the time of closing on the property, with the remainder $700,000 in acquisition cost to be repaid through TIF over, at this point, an estimated 18 and a half years. The terms of the contract require the construction of the apartments to begin by December 31st of 2020 and to be completed by December 31st of 2021. The contract also requires that the developer not discriminate against households using rental vouchers, and the contract is contingent upon the developer being awarded federal tax credits. As we've explained in some work sessions, those tax credit application is due June 3rd, and so the timing of this is before you at this point because the developer needs to show site control in order to make application for those tax credits. The decision on tax credits won't be made, however, until November, so the contract provides at that time, if they don't receive tax credits through this round, then the contract will be null and void. I just point out a couple of things regarding policies. As you know, we passed an inclusionary housing policy last fall that encourages at least a portion of developments to include affordable housing, and if not, to be able to provide a payment in lieu in order for housing to be created elsewhere. And this provides an opportunity. While it does provide a mix of housing, it is primarily affordable and helps us to sort of make up for those units that are not constructed in some of our market rate proposals. In terms of the finances, in your staff report, you see that we make certain assumptions regarding the tax increment because it will be paid over time. It is based on a minimum tax value of about $7.5 million, and there will be an assessment agreement that will require the county assessor to never assess the project for less than that, so that we are guaranteed that stream. It is using the current 4D tax rate, so there is an affordable housing tax rate that's being used. So the amount of increment that's generated is slightly less than it would be if we're a market rate project. It assumes that we'll start receiving tax payments in 2022, and it always assumes 0% inflation. So the city, because the city is the recipient of the tax payments, we need to be aware that that means the city assumes the risk. For example, if the legislature were to decide to reduce taxes on affordable housing. The below market rents plus the cost of providing supportive services creates a financing gap in the project that is partially closed with tax credits, but the city assistance through a land write-down closes the remaining gap. We'll point out that there is significant competition for tax credits. And so points are awarded for various features of a development, And so by reducing the land price in this case, it both reduces the development costs and shows the city's financial participation in the project. So they win points in both those categories, which is a plus. We've taken a look at, well, what if we didn't write down the full 700,000? You know, what if we wrote down less? And that does have an impact on the point system. So we believe that the development would not be competitive if we were to offer less of a subsidy. We would like to point out, however, that the subsidy works out to be about $12,000 per unit, which is relatively small compared to other multifamily projects that have received assistance from the HRA in recent years. If you have any other questions, I can answer those. Otherwise, the developer is also here and able to answer questions.
And Madam Chair, I would just add, we did have 2 work sessions on this, and some of the questions or concerns that I heard were kind of design specific. And so this project will be, if you approve the sale of the property and the development agreement, it would still have to go through the land use process with the Planning Commission and the City Council for a comprehensive plan amendment in either a planned unit development or a site plan approval, in which case there would be a lot of opportunities to work through design issues. So I just wanted to make that point.
Are there any other questions before we open the public hearing?
I'll reserve till after.
All right, thank you. So this is a public hearing that we're officially opening now. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to comment? All right, go ahead. If you could please sign in on the sheet and then state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, HRA Commissioners, Madam Mayor, and City staff. My name is Tim Carter. I'm the managing partner at Richfield Bloomington Honda down on 501 77th Street in Richfield. I've been there for about 18 years and absolutely love this city. And I really wanted to come in and not argue anything, but address the fact that I was made aware of this proposal in January this year, and since then I've seen a lot of support coming for it. And I'm affected by it because I have 170 employees that park there and walk to work, and I've been renting it from the city for about 4 years or so. We've grown our business quite a bit over the last 4 years, from about 97 employees 4 years ago to 170 currently, and we're on a fast track to continue to grow. I anticipate another 30 to 50 over the next 3 to 5 years, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing for everybody. So with that potential support bringing this through to approval, I need to find alternative spots for these 170 employees. And so I just wanted everybody to know that I really am grateful for the openness that the mayor and John and Katie in particular have given me to help me find some options to not have this be a real significant hazard for the growth of my business, because employee parking and convenience, that's the whole main driver of my business is my employees. So I really just wanted you to understand how much I appreciate that. I'm a big fan of business and city partnership to grow more tax money for this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on the matter? I will. All right, and please state your name and sign in. Yep. All right, you'll have 3 minutes, and then state your name and address for the record, please.
Okay. There it is. Okay. I'm Lucy Peterson, and I live at 2500 West 66th Street, apartment 308 here in Richfield. I've been here for about a year, and I don't know if people are familiar with VEAP down in Bloomington on Aldrich Avenue. It stands for Volunteers Enlisted to Assist People. There's a lot of good things there, and one of the things is they have a huge wall of information, of handouts, and one of them is their list of affordable housing that I have with me, several copies. If you can see it here, Bloomington has almost the entire page. We have 2 listed. Edina's got 6, and South Minneapolis has got 2. And so I just bring this as an example of I live in Fraser Sheridan Court, and let's see, I forget where on here, but I just want to say that we need as much affordable housing as we can get, because I was on a waiting list for my apartment for 2.5 years, and in a very unsafe place before I moved here. And so if we can build 55 units, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't, because although it has impacts obviously on the neighbors and neighboring businesses, it's a very needed resource. And like I said, it's also getting the information out about what we currently have as well. And because since I moved to Richfield, it's been my second hometown. I grew up in Coon Rapids. As much as I love that, I feel a little embarrassed to say I love living here more. I'm disabled myself. I live with severe anxiety and depression and autism, and I'm on Social Security disability. And if it wasn't for Fraser having an apartment for me, I don't know where I would be living, because it's very hard to find affordable housing, whether it be in Richfield or anywhere in the Twin Cities, that's in any way safe. And I see Richfield being a real pioneer in not just affordable housing, but accessible, that's also safe and well cared for and managed. So the more, the merrier. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak for the public hearing? All right, looks like we have another speaker. You can state your name again.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, my name is Judy Moe, and we don't currently have a permanent address. We have lived in Richfield for 5.5 years, and our landlord decided to move back into his house that we were renting, and so he didn't renew our lease. We of course, started looking for housing, and the same that we paid for our house, in order to find somewhere we could live, which we need an elevator in an apartment building, a 1-bedroom is about $1,300. And so that's what we were paying for our home. And that's what some people's mortgage is, you know? And we can't take advantage of the naturally occurring affordable housing because it's all built in the 60s, 70s, and it's all stairs. So accessible housing is actually more expensive. You know, we can afford market rate is in Richfield, but not if it's accessible, because then we're like above market rate or whatever. And I know that there are some concerns about this site. This site I have actually walked myself more than once, and I have also driven it to see the distance between where the Aldi is going to be to this site. and it's right on the bus route there. And so, I took it seriously and looked over the property, and, I would live there, and I know a lot of other people who would want to live there. And, I've heard the criticisms about if it's not a family-friendly neighborhood, or that it's an industrial area, that we have the wall over there, and so it's like segregation. Some of these things we can fix, I know, I'm not sure who brought it up, but had discussed, putting more walkways with lights to make it safer. A lot of these things I think can be fixed and still have the housing there. We desperately need affordable and accessible housing. We especially need accessible housing. And also, I know that, people are concerned about, well, who would want to live there? There's not enough green space. There's this, there's that. When people ask my daughter what her wish list is for a place to live, she says, wood floors and doorways I can get through. And so I think a lot of times when all of these things are talked about, it's coming from a place of privilege, because we just want a place to live. And that, matters more to us than is there green space, is there, whatever. We just really want a place to live, and there's a lot of people like that. And so I think we can fix some of these things, and then I think we need to let people decide if they want to live there or not. That's their choice, And I think that's it. I think it's a good project, and I am just hoping you guys are going to vote for it.
All right, thank you for your time. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at the public hearing? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at the public hearing? All right, do we have a motion to close the public hearing then?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've closed the public hearing. Do we have any discussion or comments or questions?
If I
Commissioner
may.
Elliott?
First off, I should indicate that I think when they first presented this plan to us, I agreed with everybody on the commission and most people in the city that the plan is wonderful. The site is intolerable, so that's the reason I'm going to vote against it. But I also have some questions in regards to it. Mr. Carter spoke about what the present use of it is, at least in terms of his employees' part, and I'm concerned about what site control entails. Does that mean that sometime prior to June, all those cars are going to have to be moved and he's going to have to negotiate with the new people that have site control? Or does the city maintain ownership and they've got control to do their preliminaries and everything? Because I think it's important to give Mr. Carter, who's been a wonderful contributor, him and his company, to the community, the opportunity to work through with the city manager and staff to try to find what alternatives are available before he has to remove those vehicles.
We won't close on the property until they are awarded tax credits, until they get all their land use approvals. So I would anticipate it'd be sometime next year.
Okay, so what exactly does site control mean then?
He has a purchase agreement with us, and that's what the development agreement is. It's a purchase agreement that says if these conditions are met, then we will sell them the property.
Okay. Judy, can you tell me how does that translate into site control?
I think it's, I don't know that we, it's words to, that are that differentiated. This is in terms of the application to Minnesota Housing Finance Authority. They need to be given some evidence that the applicant for the tax credits has some ability to acquire the property. And this gives them that demonstration.
So it's more a question of semantics than actual control.
That's what I would say.
Okay. Second thing is, and it's not, you gave us the difference between the contribution's 12,000 per unit as opposed to Chamberlain and some of the others, but does that take into account the tax credits and also the 4D tax credit? That's what Seasons got. They came in at 2 and then they ended up at 4D. How does that impact what we're going to get back on the TIF? Particularly the 4D, because that minimizes their tax rate, correct?
Yeah, and the TIF analysis, and Rebecca Kurtz from Ellers and Associates is here and could perhaps speak to this more, but the TIF analysis reflects the 4D status already. And so even with 4D, they're taxed at a 0.75 percentage. The class rate is 0.75%. So that's figured into the TIF analysis. And we would still get our remaining $700,000 back through the TIF, even
Yeah.
with that consideration.
I don't need the actual mechanics. I'm just wondering if that has any impact on our per unit cost as a city. Or is that factored into that? You say we're contributing or our contribution is 12,000 plus per unit.
It's purely the math of 700,000 divided by 55.
Okay.
It just takes longer under the 4D rate for us to get that money back.
Okay. Another question is, when does the 3% interest kick in? When does that start accruing?
Once we close on the property.
And what's the anticipated closing date?
Sometime in 2020.
Okay, and payments start to us sometime in 2022.
Right.
An interesting question I've got, and it's when you talk about the income averaging. So it appears to me in reading that someone can come in with more income than 70% API, but then what you'll do is balance it on the lower side. So the way it reads is if you have someone that exceeds the 30 to 70% range, you can do income averaging by people that are coming in at the lower end. Is that correct?
Chris, could you explain, the income averaging is a new thing with the tax credit program? So will
I'm
it-
just wondering if we're going to keep it affordable, why we're income
It's-
averaging in the first place.
It's not going to be over 70%. It can go up to 70.
And can you state your name for the record, please?
Yep. Chris Stoka, MWF Properties, 7645 Glendale Avenue South, Richfield. That's a good question. So the income averaging is more so, it's a new, basically, formula in the tax credit program. Previously, you could only go up to 60% of the area median income. That was the maximum that the program allowed, and that's per household. And then, it was identified that there were still families that earned above 60% that still couldn't afford homes, people in 70%, 80% range. So before we close on the building, before the building's built, we'll designate units at 70%, 60%. There's some that are at 30%. And those units, they will stay at that income range. So if the bottom line is no household will exceed 70% area median income when they move in. It can't be offset. It's basically just the way that we classify the unit maximum income.
Okay. Let me ask you a question in regards to the pricing then. If you're going to allocate or indicate which units are set at which level, correct? Is it fair to assume that the 3-bedroom and most of the 2-bedroom are going to be at the upper level with the 1-bedrooms and some of the other 2-bedrooms being at the lower level? Is that correct? I mean,
Yes,
otherwise, how does it work?
That's how we did it on this one, just because the 3 bedrooms and the 2 bedrooms, we just thought, I think this question was asked at the workshop, but we just thought it was the 60% rent limits were a little more achievable than a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. It's a little more difficult for a single person to achieve a 70% income, and that's kind of what we thought.
Can you give me any indication of what the rent on a 3-bedroom unit is going to be?
Around $1,400.
Okay, 2-bedroom?
2-bedroom is, we have some around 1,000 and some 1,150, I think.
In 1-bedroom?
1-bedroom, let's see, well, there's the 30% units that are at 720. So 720.
Okay. And it's still a work in progress, so
Yeah, and we're still learning. This is a new, the income averaging is new for everyone in the whole country. We've just seen at our other properties that, we'll have someone who's 61%, earns 61% of the area median income, and we'd have to turn them away. So we thought that income averaging would allow us to capture more households that might be just over what the previous rules allowed.
And I looked at some of the eligibility requirements for some of the tenants, and you take pains in a couple of places it talks about families, in other places it talks about individuals. It's my understanding that you can't, or can you? Can you set a definition for family for, say, for the 3-bedroom units, or is it the income? I guess what I'm trying to say, I'm trying to make this clear. If you got three individuals that just graduated college and all working just entry-level jobs and everything, they would have the ability within the proper ranges to secure a 3-bedroom apartment, correct?
Yeah, that question actually comes up quite a bit, and technically speaking, yes, you could have 3 young professionals that would qualify collectively, but all of our marketing efforts and, the whole property's advertised as a family property, we really don't see that very often.
But if they showed up and they qualified, would you be at risk of housing discrimination if you turned them down because they weren't what you constitutes a nuclear family?
Well, we wouldn't turn them down. I mean, we won't discriminate based on familial status, whether you have a family or you don't have a family. We just don't see it very often at our properties.
I'm just wondering how that type of application is going to be weighed against a family, and how are you going to make sure there is no discrimination in the selection process?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we have an in-house management company that, they're very well versed in fair housing laws, which are pretty robust, and they do, strongly, they have a lot of regulations in place to make sure that housing discrimination does not happen.
Okay. And one of the concerns that I addressed, I think, at our last work session was, ideally, I think everybody up here would like to see the 3-bedroom units occupied by a parent or parents and 2 or 3 children and everything that would attend our schools and everything, but I'm trying to figure out where the hell they're going to play. What have you provided for 8 to 10-year-olds or 5 to 10-year-olds? What are those kids going to do?
We do have a tot lot planned on site, and typically with all of our developments, whether they're in the suburbs or they're in a city, there's only really one property that we have that doesn't have a on-site small tot lot, and it's really designed for kids age 3 to 7 because kids older than that really go off-site and do other things anyways. We also do have indoor community room, a pretty large community room, and a small fitness center too.
Have you, when we talked about the plan before, have you worked with the city or talked with the city or the county, anything about trying to figure out some safe space, safe ways, getting those kids across 77th Street, maybe over to the ball fields or some other play areas? Because there's nothing around you, it's all industrial and commercial, right?
Yeah, we haven't had any conversations since the workshop, but that's primarily because, we don't have the land under contract, and, investigating that takes time and resources. But it's definitely something that, we haven't forgotten about, and it's something that we take seriously and will investigate as part of the land use approval process.
Okay. And last question is, there's indicated in the staff report to us that you'd had a meeting with the community, the people around you, and I didn't see any comment sheets or anything from any of the people that may have attended that. Did you post sheets on what they thought about you moving in there or taking over that lot? I'm just curious as to what the neighbors thought.
Yeah, we had an open house format to allow the most flexibility for people who wanted to attend, so we didn't have a specific start time. We didn't actually take notes from the meeting, but there were a significant number of city staff representatives there, as well as council members, so we felt that the feedback was heard real time, I guess. We didn't see
Is there any feedback that the commission should know about or have some understanding of what was said by the resident or the commercial industries that are around there?
Yes, thank you. You know, I would say, first of all, it was well attended. Secondly, it was a little unusual for me in that there were a number of area businesses that were there, which a lot of times we don't see when we have invitations. So there were a lot of the small businesses surrounding that. I think their concern that I heard was more with, what does this mean for us in the future? Does this mean you, city or HRA, would like to see us go away and be replaced by housing? They did have some concerns about where their employees park on the street and whether that would be impacted. They did share some of the same concerns that we've heard from policymakers about, how kids would cross the street and where kids would play. In terms of area residents, I believe there were 3 residents that were in attendance. All of, either two were apartment residents and one was a homeowner. And the feedback I heard from them was all positive.
Have you had any informal discussions with traffic management or anything? Because once again, unless they change the plan, there's one ingress and egress, and you come off onto, Pillsbury? And you can only go east when you get to 77th. How are they going to manage 55 units, which presumably 55 autos at least?
That'll all be part of the land use approvals process. They'll submit their application, and then we go through our administrative review committee, which includes traffic and public works and stormwater and planning and lots of things we'll have to look at when that process starts, probably this summer.
I would say that there have been some high-level discussions. The city manager has been involved in that with me, and so there's interest in finding some ways to improve, not just for this development, all along 77th Street. It can be a daunting street to cross, and whether there are ways to make that a less challenging street to get across, because we have a lot of parks just on the north side of 77th Street. Here, Lincoln Park's not that far away, but if you go further to the east, there's Washington, there's Roosevelt, and there is a lot of multifamily right across the street, and it shouldn't be so hard for a multifamily resident to get to the park that's so near to them.
Right.
Well, the city will be actively participating in whatever decisions made in terms of safe passage of those children in and outside of the neighborhood.
Well, I would say we're certainly mindful of it, and we're going to be looking at it. And in this case, it would be a new situation, but a block away is New Orleans Court, and that's been an existing situation there for years. And we're not aware of any historical problems.
New Orleans Court has been there since the 60s, and 77th Street didn't come anywhere near what it is today, so it's not really a great analogy. But I understand, it's been there a long time. It's an entire different complex. It's got front doors opening onto it. It's not an apartment complex. There's no hallways. There's no concourses. So it's not really a good analogy.
But it's still got kids, and it's still got parks on the north side of 77th Street, and so we are mindful of that, I would say.
Thank you.
All right.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Are there other commissioners that would like to weigh in? Go ahead.
Yes. So over the study session before this, Commissioner Supple and I got 3 letters of support, and I just asked City Manager Rodriguez to print them off. I'm not going to read them, but I wanted to acknowledge that since there was a public hearing, and we got those correspondences from residents, Richfield residents. Okay. So I had a couple questions. So, when you're saying 2020, is there any more detail on if that's like 6 or 7 months from now or towards the end of 2020? So thinking about a a little more detail on when that spot would have to be cleared, and then would there be preparation of land and all of that?
Sorry. According to the contract, we need them to have land use approvals by June 1st of 2020, and we're expecting them to close. It's either September or December of 2020. Sorry, I can't find it right now.
And those are dates no later than?
Right.
In terms of the earliest, maybe I would look to MWF to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, the very earliest we would close would be April or May of next year, but, I mean, we're amenable. We're not gonna just, I mean, if the city wants to work with the Honda dealership, we'd be amenable to that. As long as we're able to meet our no later than deadlines, we can work with the city. I mean, we're not gonna be bullies or anything with that.
And in terms of looking at the proposed plan that would have to go through the rest of the council process and looking at planning and going through our staff, this is just to get that agreement for the application. So there's continued conversations that could be had around green space and amenities for kids and different things like that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there have been a lot of questions about the design, and that was basically just our initial run, just to give you a general sense of what we're trying to do, and get some initial feedback. We still have to get engineers involved and our architect more in-depth drawings and civil design and things like that. But we generally don't do that until we have a site under contract, just because there's significant costs with that type of stuff. So that's just kind of our policy. So this is typically our first step when we look at developments, is getting the site under contract, so that we know we at least have an opportunity to submit something to the city.
Thank you. And I had said some of these comments when I had expressed my support of this at the study session. But just the fact that this project is, I think, a very quality project, and it improves accessibility of housing for different groups of residents in Richfield where it's extremely difficult, including residents with disabilities, that market need for 2 to 3 bedroom apartments. I really did like the fact that there was supportive services. When I went to the neighborhood meeting, I did hear concerns around traffic impacts in relation to their business operations. So this is something that I think is important to keep looking at if it moves forward. And a couple things there's 2 items that I thought this proposal brought up that I think should be investigated regardless. And I would really, this is my opinion, but I would really like to see a more in-depth study of 494 and the impacts that the underpass will have, and what do we do with that? So those questions were raised for this development, but there is existing housing there now. I actually have one of the constituents who is here talk to me, and I've had a couple residents say, how can we get better crossings in some of the areas where some of those apartments are? So I really do think reimagining this corridor and hopefully if and when the underpass comes, regardless of this development, I would like to look at that and see how do we make it a little more of a community feel. What does the mix of commercial and housing look like there, and be more intentional in looking at that corridor, because it is an important, and it's increasing in importance to our community. And then the next thing is just being really concerned and working hand in hand with business owner Carter on locating the parking, whether this passes or not. That is going to be a need that needs to be fulfilled, and having very clear communication with Mr. Carter and his business, and making sure that we're doing everything we can. And I don't know, John, if you can just speak to a little bit about some preliminary conversations and how we're thinking of moving that piece forward.
Yes, thank you. So we have had a number of conversations with Mr. Carter about other possibilities we can explore for parking. He'd mentioned that he'd been on the current site for 4 years, or I don't know, if 4 years plus or minus. That's under what's called an interim use permit. An interim use permit by ordinance can only last for 5 years. And so, this is something that we're going to have to be dealing with anyway. There are some possible solutions within Richfield's borders that we're going to be exploring. We've got a punch list of 4 or 5 things that we're going to be looking through. Mr. Carter's got a punch list of 2 or 3 things that he's going to be following up on as well.
When will you be notified if you moved through the next step and you get those credits
November 1st.
of this year? Okay. So I'm happy to hear that you are not going to, you'll be working with us and Tim in the city to look at parking, because that's really huge. Those are the only questions and comments I have.
Right. Are there any other comments from other commissioners?
I missed the last work session, but was at the first one. And I feel the same way. I think this is a very needed piece of housing in our community, and there are definitely some challenges that need to be worked through, but I fully support this.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Sandal?
Thank you. I also missed one of the work sessions, so I have a few more questions. I will say I was out of town. Is 55 units the number that there will be total number, or is it possibly less than that? I wasn't clear.
Well, we haven't even started the city entitlement process, so parking, traffic, building elevations, that'll all come into play. So no, it's up to the city to approve. It's not entitled for 55 units at this time.
All right. And I'm assuming there would have to be underground parking for this place, and are we thinking 3 floors? Is that what's being considered?
Right now, it's 4 floors over underground parking.
Okay. And how much on-street, or not on-street, but on-site parking would there be?
There's currently, we're planning on 1.5 stalls per unit, which in an area that has public transportation that's accessible, it's very accessible here, that's more than adequate.
Okay. My concern is similar to Mr. Elliott's, and that is, if I look at, we just did a little study session with a map of where the zoning is in the city of Richfield. And all the way along most of 494, it's pink, which is commercial. And so this is a little different. I understand it's actually zoned multifamily residential. Is that correct?
It's zoned mixed-use neighborhood,
Oh, mixed-use neighborhood, okay.
which is what the guide plan is.
Okay.
It's for mixed use.
Yeah. So at any rate, but if I look at the rest of and drive by the rest of the area, it's mostly commercial. There is the New Orleans apartments further down the street, but it is mostly commercial. So that is of concern to me. It doesn't seem like the greatest place to put residential housing south of the busy street. And I'm sure it'll be busier if the tunnel ever gets built. We keep trying. I am, however, going to support it because I think it's a use that we need. I think the city is supportive of housing for those who need it and also for those with disabilities, which I think is a very nice thing that we're considering having in this unit. And if we ever have a path instead of a train, we might even have a trail to get you across the street. So I will support it, but I do think that all of the concerns that Mr. Elliott raised and that people have raised about crossing and safety and play areas for kids are all very important, and that all of those things should be considered if we go forward with this. And I do appreciate the fact that the city is working with Mr. Carter to find parking. My suggestion is that we have a lot of churches that have declining enrollments, and that they can use the income, frankly. St. Richard's is certainly one of them. They've been receiving parking money from one other dealer. And I think maybe we need to be a little flexible to allow that to happen. So I'm encouraging the staff to look at maybe whatever the guidelines are to make sure that that would be considered as a use, because mostly during the week, the parking lots are empty. And it's worked pretty well for the one that we do have right now on Richfield. We put in some shrubs as requested by the neighbors, and it's not I think it's a plus for both the city and for the dealership, and also for the church. Helps to provide the income that the declining enrollment has resulted in. A loss. Thank you.
I also liked the fact that this was going to be helping people that are in the 30 AMI, because I know we have a lot of affordable housing for people that are 60% of the area median income in Richfield, but we don't have hardly anything for the people that are at the 30% level. I also like that there's the accessibility features and the supportive services for people, so I think those are all good things, and the actual plans you were showing us looked really fabulous. I did go to the open house, and I did hear the concerns about what's going to happen with parking, traffic flows, and I think those are things we need to keep working on. So at this point, if there's no further discussion, then I think we can call for the vote. Oh, we need someone to make the motion, I'm sorry.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor with a second to consider adoption of a resolution approving a contract for private development with MWF Properties for the redevelopment of the city garage site at 7700 Pillsbury Avenue South with 55 units of affordable workforce housing. Is there any further discussion? All right, thank you all for all the comments and for all the work that's gone into this. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
All right, we've approved the motion. Moving on to HRA discussion items. Are there any items that commissioners would like to bring up? I did have one announcement. I know over the last year or so, we've talked a lot about the Southdale Library site, and there's a proposal now for when it gets redeveloped, that it'll be built in Southdale Mall. And so there's been a lot of community interest in this topic, and there are 2 open houses that are scheduled that are going to be held at Southdale Library. One is from 6 to 8 p.m. on Thursday, May 30th. So 6 to 8 p.m. Thursday, May 30th. The other one is from 10 to noon on Saturday, June 8th. So 10 to noon, Saturday, June 8th. So I would really encourage people to come and give their input and be part of this whole discussion. Are there any other discussion items?
I just wanted to say, sorry about that. I just wanted to say thank you to our staff for preparing a really great joint City Council and HRA study session before this on redevelopment, and helping us look at all the different areas of opportunity for redevelopment in Richfield and start thinking as a group where we want to prioritize and what lenses we want to take when we are looking at redevelopment for the future. And I know the answers were not all solved, but it was a really great start, and thanks to staff for prepping us for that conversation.
Cool, thank you. Commissioner Sandal.
Thank you. Just an announcement. I wanted to let everyone know that's interested that the Richfield Bandshell will have its opening ceremonies on Sunday, June 9th, and that will be at 6 o'clock. There will be 2 bands performing, and we will have a wonderful program, and it's a wonderful facility that we now have. And just wanted everybody to put that on your calendar, because you'll be sorry you missed it.
All right, do we have any other discussion items? All right. Go ahead.
I was going to say one, we had talked about it at a study session a couple weeks ago, and sorry, I just briefly talked about this, but one of the concerns that was brought up was when people purchase their new home here in Richfield, not knowing what the zoning is considered as part of it. And I know that this body had enacted a couple years ago Truth in Housing. And I'm just wondering if we can start exploring what that would look like to tack on that zoning with Truth in Housing. and what that would look like, just at a future.
Yeah.
Briefly, yeah.
Yep, I can report that back to you in the future.
All right, thank you. Are there any other HRA discussion items? All right, then we'll move on to the Executive Director's report. Mr. Stark.
Thank you, Chair Supple. I do not have a prepared report tonight. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
All right, thank you. And then claims and payroll was emailed out. Would someone like to make the motion to approve it?
I move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of approving claims and payroll, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, well, thank you for all the community participation, and we stand adjourned.
We don't need those computers at all. We just need an agenda. I'm like trying to look. She was looking at it, yeah.